Good morning. How are you, Steph? It's good to have you back.
It just turned afternoon.
It's always
Like
morning.
1 minute ago.
It's always morning here.
That's how I feel right now after traveling across 18,000 time zones. Yeah, I don't even know what time of the day. I don't even know what day it is right now.
My wife and I, I was on the road. I was on the road with my wife, and we were having a long conversation. And then she says, "You have no sense of direction, do you?" And I said, "Where did that come from?"
Oh, you didn't, honestly. It was really interesting, actually. For some reason, like we were really tired, and our first flight coming home was 11 hours. And we didn't sleep at all during the whole time. But you can watch your plane going over like where it's tracking to.
Mm-hmm.
And so we went from Athens to Toronto, and it like kind of went up and over Greenland. But we seemed to like we could track each of the little countries that we were over. And then it would give you all this little like information about each of the countries. Did you know that Ireland's got the fastest growing capital city in the world?
It is the fastest. I did not know that.
Every day it's Dublin. Did you miss me? This is where you have to say you missed me.
I missed you. I don't know about your dad jokes, but I definitely missed you. Steph, we have a really fun topic and a very sophisticated guest today. I'm kind of looking forward to this. I know.
So I sort of feel bad for her that she has to.
Yeah, I'm gonna try to. So I'm gonna pretend and act dumb.
You don't have to pretend. I mean, that comes naturally, right?
I set you up. I set you up for that. You're welcome. All right. So, what if your leadership identity is the ceiling on your company's growth? What if you're the problem, Steph? Did you know, according to MIT's Sloan Management Review in 2022, 58% of executives admit that their leadership approach hasn't evolved with their organization's growth stage. Take Jason Cohen of WP Engine. He discovered his consensus-driven style. Oh, we could talk 10 hours about that. His consensus-driven style worked brilliantly until rapid scaling demanded faster decisions. His insight applies broadly. Rigid leadership identities create bottlenecks that stall companies at predictable inflection points. Today, on How to Founder, we'll be talking about becoming a leader and how your leadership style really matters as you grow. I'm your host, Anthony Franco. With me today is my wonderfully rested and vacationed co-host, Stephanie Hayes. And with us today, we have Dr. Christiane. Christiane she's a TEDx speaker, top 1% podcaster, and leadership coach with a PhD in health economics. Like way too many credentials for our podcast. She helps founders overcome fear and inconsistency through her Petite Practice framework. There's a TM on that, Petite Practice TM framework, blending behavioral science with business scaling for sustainable growth. Do we have to pay you a licensing fee to mention that, or are we okay to continue to talk?
Every time you say it, it's $1.
Okay.
No, Christiane,
you're saying it.
You shoot for the stars. It's more like $10,000.
It's $10,000.
Yeah.
In US dollars, not Canadian. All right.
You should be charging in euros. Let me tell you, after 2 weeks in Europe, holy smokes, that's an expensive place to be.
I'm really curious. So I'm just going to ask you outright. What does this Petite Practice framework? What is that?
It's essential. Like we're going right back to Europe. If you think about what Petite really stands for, it's French. I was
Yeah.
giving you a break. I was like, you know
It
it?
means small.
Speak to me like I'm a 5-year-old.
I
Yes.
was like, hold on, let's start from the beginning.
Petite means small.
Oh, thanks, Stephanie, jumping in here. I love that. Petite means small, and when you think about practice, it kind of reminds you of sports or becoming an athlete. When you just keep repeating, being very consistent, and refining your craft, and that's really what petite practice is. You're taking small steps to reaching your goals.
Well, so so how can we relate that to? Well, let's back up. First of all, we're talking today about how you need to change your leadership style as your company grows.
Mm-hmm.
So leaders kind of start with basically their especially when you're starting in a startup, when you're early stage founder, you're kind of just going on intuition and gut. And that if you're not a complete jerk, that gets you so far. And then you have to modify that. So at what point do you think, what's the first stage in leaders having to kind of really think about their leadership style?
So when I prepared for this podcast, I actually prepared a little dad joke for you too, Anthony. So I'm actually ready with that right now too. Like,
Okay,
this is the perfect transition going into my dad joke and the question.
Well, honestly, the first rule of dad joke is you can't say you're gonna tell a dad joke. So you're starting in a deficit right now.
Kind of gave it away. I should have just answered the question. People would be like, why is she saying this? What? I know. Why did the startup founder bring a mirror to the team meeting?
Why did the startup founder bring a mirror to the team meeting? Why?
To reflect on their leadership style. That's pretty much what we're going to talk about today.
Okay.
Reflection. Because if you think about leadership styles and what some of those, flaws or improvements are, you don't need to think you drastically need to change, which is where the petite practice come in. It's just small steps, small little adjustments. And it might already help in just looking in the mirror and reflecting on what you currently do. What is it maybe that you could change with regard to that? Because leadership isn't just about following a certain strategy. It's using your own energy and aligning with that. So I'm just going to leave that at that point.
So so if you're talking what we're talking about is being conscious about your leadership style.
Exactly.
So at what point do you think at what point do you need to really care about your leadership style? Like when it's just you work for a jerk, right? You work for yourself. But at what point do you need to start? And it's not one employee or two employees, but at some point you need to really be conscious about how you're leading. At what point do you think that is?
If you feel that you're drained and exhausted and depleted of energy when you go into a team meeting, they're going to feel that too. I think there's always a point of self-reflection when you hold that door handle and you open the room and you step inside of what you really want to portray, because they're going to look at you as a role model. And if you're completely burnt out and you stand there and you're exhausted and you're super tired, that's probably the point when you should question your leadership style, because you are essentially letting them know that that's the way that you expect they are showing up to their work as well. And that's a big warning sign right there. It's like, don't do that, right?
So Stephanie, Christiane says one of the ways is if you're feeling drained when going to meetings. What are other warning signs or red flags that you've noticed in when you needed to change how you lead?
So I think one of the big red flags is when we can't get to a decision, or when you like we're dealing with this right now with a particular client that just has a complete leadership gap, right there, and everyone is trying to do everything at the same time, and nobody ever takes ownership. And so when we're always in the spin and when everything always feels like it's frantic and urgent, that is because we have a leadership gap for sure. I also think that there's there's something about being able to identify what your leadership style is in the first place, right? So before we can even solve this problem, there's a sense of awareness. And, we talk about this a lot on this show. It comes up in almost every episode is the need to be self-aware as a leader, right? As a founder. And so having the self-awareness and to be able to identify your own leadership style and understand how you need to be able to be fluid. I personally don't think that people need to stick or should stick to one particular leadership style in their organization at any given time. Like, we need to be able to be fluid in different circumstances. And in some cases, a more consensus style leadership is necessary and effective, and in other certain circumstances, a more command type leadership is going to be more effective. So I don't know if that sort of tracks with your own research and your own work, Christiane, but I do think that fluidity is super important.
I completely agree, because I think we are changing as humans as well. And even as the company changes, we should adjust the leadership style based on any internal as well as external adaptations and really reflect what's going on. So the fluidity also means that you're agile and that you're staying on top of what's going on, and you're tuning more into being intelligent about trends. And I think that a good leader is just that. They can read the room, but they can also read the trends, and they can read the company, and they are kind of like the mediator between all of this, and then letting the team know that if they have any reflections, any ideas, or anything that's on their mind, that they are also in tune with that. And I love that you mentioned the word fluid, because I think that a good leader is sometimes nearly like a sponge, to where you have to really take in, moments where there is frustration, moments when there is maybe a lot of change, and sometimes even say, I need to think about this before I can immediately let you know my decision, and then step back and come back and be that sponge that says, all right, so I listened to you and I reflected on this, and this is really a good decision about this. Because not everybody has to be this extrovert. A lot of really amazing leaders are introverts, and they're really emotionally in tuned and empathetic. And what I mentioned with the sponge is really somebody that does just that. And I think that really reflects an amazing leader, somebody that is not just reactive, but is a little bit more proactive in responding as well.
Something that popped up actually twice now already in this podcast episode. Stephanie, you said it once, and it was in our opening. This notion of, and this is how I used to lead, was consensus building. And I don't want to lead the witness here, but it just didn't work for me. At a certain stage, consensus building breaks. So I'd love for you to talk a little bit about the difference between, and I'll throw it to either one of you, the difference between consensus building and collaboration, and why one is more important than the other.
I think there's always, whenever there's overwhelm, and when Stephanie talked about this as well, there's always a decision. All right, do I want to eliminate certain tasks? Do I want to delegate them? Do I want to automate them? Consensus is amazing if everybody at the table actually has knowledge about it. And it's great if you feel you can include people with their particular area of knowledge. I think it sometimes helps to actually delegate a decision to people that really are in tune with it and are very knowledgeable about it. And then they can come back and report it, and the whole team can still chime in and let us know what they think about it. That's kind of that delegating. And then a decision could be made. Sometimes consensus just leads to like nearly smearing decisions around, because it goes back and forth, and people are chiming in that might not have the same insight. They might not be as involved with it. And so it's really, not every decision is great in terms of making it consensus oriented. And being more efficient also means that you make a decision, which one should I ask the whole team, which one shouldn't I?
And I think that there's like this in sort of rudimentary beginner level understanding of leadership and leadership style. I think that, like, if we go back to the .com days when it was just like everybody's part of the team, and it was very popular to have,
We're a family.
this, yeah. And then, obviously you run into some challenges, and at different phases of your business growth, you're going to require different types of leadership. And so it's consensus is, and having everybody be part of a decision is not always the goal, right? Like, that's not always what we're trying to seek. So I think the real skill here is being able to understand how leadership styles affect outcomes, and being really clear on what you're trying to do. I would go into a sales meeting with a customer and have a completely different leadership style than I would have if I was sitting around the table with my team, right? So I think leadership style correlates to what you're trying to achieve inside of the business, and having everybody have a say isn't necessarily good for the business, right? And what it does is it actually sets a precedent that everybody does have a say, and that unless we do that, we are not doing what we should be doing, and like that becomes really problematic. So I wonder if you can talk a little bit about the leadership styles that, like, a good founder, a good leader sort of needs to be able to flow in and out of those different leadership styles, and know enough about them. So what are some of those key kind of leadership archetypes that you think are most widely used or necessary, and how do they correlate to your stage of growth, or do they?
Well, I think you brought up this beautiful comparison that I frequently use when I talk about this topic. I call it the dishwasher principle, right? It's like the rinse, coming to the main wash, and then the dry, etc. So stages are always following a certain principles of how decisions are made. And I think it's so important when you're a good leader that you're really in tune, and who are those people that are in the early stages of making decisions, who are people that are really involved, and who are people that are maybe just on the back end of that particular decision, and that you delegate based on that. And I think it sometimes helps to be a good leader to maybe really figure out what each person is doing. So having one-on-one meetings and figuring out what their roles and responsibilities are. So when you make a decision and figure out whether it's delegating or having a consensus orientation, that you're actually really in tune with what are people doing? Are my expectations of what their job functions are in line with what they actually see themselves, their responsibilities are? Because if they're not aligned, if they're mismatched, I'm immediately creating a somewhat hostile environment. And, that's unfortunate, but it does happen. So being very clear about expectations and responsibilities is definitely the first step. And then at the same time, I also think that a great leader is somebody that is also open to suggestions from the team. I always tell my clients and my students, for me, if you have the decision between two different job offers, always go for the one where you feel you're going to learn a lot from the leader, right? Really feeling like you're going to work in a company, we can learn a lot from that leader, and that leader is actually going to be a role model, because they are showing you how to make decisions in a way that they tune in with you, but at the same time, they also understand who you are and use your strengths to the best capability.
So I feel like we're kind of dancing between working for somebody that's a good person, like
Yeah.
character, and I just want to draw the distinction, and maybe Stephanie, you can help me here. Draw the distinction between character and leadership style.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
You're on mute, Steph.
That's helpful. I was typing away on my notes for the episode, and I didn't want to sound clickety clacky. I sort of think that they're actually really related to each other. And one of the questions I was going to sort of raise for Christiane is, like, what actually makes a good leader? And it's not that, I think there's too many instances where, founders of companies go and take some leadership training course, and then they adopt some style, and they just, they're a good leader because they are a I'll tell you one of the phrases that I absolutely detest right now that is so popular and is so problematic in my eyes is like everybody calls themselves a servant leader and the servant leadership. And I don't get me on my soapbox about that. But as an
I'm editing my
example,
LinkedIn profile right now.
as an example, you know, we have a lot of, especially in the sort of the technology space right now, we have a lot of these guys who went through, you know, agile training, and they're all about servant leadership, but they don't really know what that means, right? And to me, it's like a good project manager is not somebody who's gone through the PMP and gotten a PMP certification. It's somebody who has great intuition, great communication skills, great negotiation skills, and knows how to like get people in one place. So it's you know, just because I have a certificate in leadership or I've done my leadership training does not make me a good leader. What makes me a good leader is in my opinion anyway, you guys can both sort of refute this, is somebody who makes their team and people feel like they have had the ownership, responsibility, and impact to be able to, you know, do something in a way that feels really good for them, even if they require direction. So like a leader is really sort of the puppet master as opposed to the commander, right? And they have enough intuition to be able to direct their team of all very diverse people to get to one outcome where everyone feels like they contributed and everyone feels really good about the outcome.
I'm curious here. So I don't think we're nailing it, and I want to make sure that we do the audience a service here by really defining what leadership style is. Maybe, you know, there's a difference between being a good leader and how you choose to show up as a leader. Maybe it'd be easier to talk about what a bad leadership style is. Like what are some traits, what are some things that you may be exhibiting in your leadership style that you might want to drop?
Yeah, I think this is what's beautiful what Stephanie just said. I call it the one size fits all leadership approach, where you're feeling you need to act in a certain way and just like following a manual because that's maybe what you learned in some training. That is
I just
definitely.
want to point out here, Anthony, that she said what I said was really beautiful.
Yes, we'll get back to that in a minute. Keep going.
Yeah, so that's a complete myth. Just think the one size fits all leadership style is the one that you need to go for just because you learned it in some training or you're following some manual. That definitely is a complete myth right there. Because in reality, the most effective leaders aren't the ones that are following some leadership manual. They are maybe the ones that are really aligning with themselves in who they are as a person and showcasing more of that person in it. So they're actually truly linked. Leadership styles and a person are really like the Venn diagram is where the magic middle really happens. Because you are an amazing leader if you're an amazing human and you're tuning in with what makes you an amazing human.
Yeah, but you could be an amazing human and a really crappy leader.
And vice versa, right? Like you could
yeah, totally.
I don't actually, you know what? I don't
like,
know
was
if you
Steve
can
Jobs
be
a great human being?
Nobody was a great leader.
He was a great leader, exactly right.
And why was he a great leader? Anthony.
So in my opinion, he had so not in my opinion. What other leaders have said about Steve Jobs, right? What other leaders have said is he had an incredible sense of style. He had incredible empathy for what his customers wanted. He had clarity of vision, and he was decisive. Those are the things that I think made Steve Jobs a great leader. Do you agree or disagree?
Are you asking me? I'd like to ask Christiane.
Yeah, me too.
I agree with you. And I think what helped him too is that he had Tim Cook as his like wingman, or however you want to call it, right? The person that's kind of running a company.
We can add incredible judge of talent to that too. You're absolutely right. Yes.
Yeah. So you always need to be aware of your own, maybe I call it shortcomings, right? So feeling, do I want to run a company? Do I want to make decisions? That was probably like where he pulled back and let somebody else take over. And that's, I think, what a good leader does. They are aware about their strength and they're aware about communicating them. And at the same time, they know how to rely on others and align the very best people around them that complement their own strength. And I think that makes a really good leader, somebody that understands him or herself so well that they know, what do I need to make this a really good leadership team, to make this to where somebody is going to be the public facing leader and somebody is going to be the internal facing leader, and somebody has the vision and somebody has more the day-to-day operation mind. And I think that made him amazing, that he understood that.
And I
think
think
you
there's
just
a,
so I want to just mention this, Steph, and I want you to weigh in on that too. But there is this weird like mixture of confidence and humility. And nobody would say that great leaders are humble, but maybe they are, because at least they know what their strengths are, and they can balance those strengths with other people that have strengths in areas that they're weak. I mean, Strengths Finders is one of my favorite books of all time for that reason. So Stephanie, is that humility a requirement to great leadership?
well, my answer to that is that excessive ego is definitely the opposite of that, right? So, these great leaders, they don't necessarily need to be humble and self-deprecating, but they need to have a really good sense of the fact that when we get to scale an organization and we want to achieve something, there's a whole team of people that need to do that. And it's not going to be all about you. But at some point in time, I think about like my partner. He's an amazing leader. And in fact, the work that he does is all around purpose and people-led culture and what have you. So he's very people-centered anyway, but he just sort of naturally is this amazing leader because he just like, he knows when to be the figurehead, and he knows when to, hand off to his team, and he knows when to empower other people and put them on the spot and let them shine. So that sort of in and out and that flowing is super duper important. But I also think that there's this really important piece, which is having a vision for the leader that you want to be. So when I know who I want to show up as, and when I have a really good sense of who I want to be as a leader, like what that feels like, what that looks like, then I can make decisions in the moment about how I want to react to circumstances, or how I want to show up in conflict, or how I want to, what's my best option here. Because sometimes if we don't have that, we sort of default to the things that we think we do well, or that are our safe places. And those aren't necessarily in the service of the bigger vision. So continuing to know what kind of leader you want to be, and that vision for yourself as a leader. And that doesn't always have to be the same, right?
Beautiful. Yeah.
Yeah. Talk a little bit about that, Christiane, and as well as you said something, Stephanie, that's really interesting. Ego, or almost like, I mean, there's so many traits that are similar between highly effective leaders and serial killers. They've even done studies on that narcissistic element. So how is that a requirement to be a great leader?
To be
completely narcissistic and ego and
Okay.
egotistical?
I wasn't sure were they going to back to the serial killer. I was
or to be a
getting juicy. Okay, so the way that I actually think about leaders, and that's also what I teach in my classes, right? So if you think about the word leader, so L-E-A-D, I always start with a good leader is somebody that listens. Listening is so important. And you just mentioned being that ego-driven individual. You need to listen first and then speak. Listening, especially if you think about sales, is much more important because you can actually tune in what the issues are, what the problems are, and what needs to happen. I mean, the worst meetings are the ones where just somebody's standing there and just talking for an hour. You're like, what just happened, right? This
I've
was
been a
like,
part of a lot of
whoa,
those.
like words coming
Yeah, I've
down
been a
on
part of a
me.
lot of sales meeting where the salesperson was talked the entire time and didn't ask me a single question. I'm thinking, does he even care
I know.
about what the problem is that
Beautiful.
we're trying to solve? You're
So
right.
that-
Listen is critical.
L for listen, E for empathy, right? After you listened, you have to show some empathy. And that could even be asking really good questions. I always say there's really no such thing as a bad question. We could still argue about that because some questions are actually not ideal. Let's maybe use that word. But good leaders ask good questions. And I think after you listened, you can ask follow-up questions to really understand the context of what's really going on. So L, listen, E, empathy. And then A is really being very authentic, being aligned with who you are, because then we come to the D, delegating. Some leaders think that they can do it all, where in reality, nobody does that. Nobody's superhuman and feeling like they just like showing up and they're like the best in the show. I think you need to be aware that if you are listening, you're bringing the words to the table, you are showing empathy, you are being authentic. That's the moment when you actually make a decision how you can delegate. And that also shows the team that you're trusting them, which is what a good team leader does. They are showing trust, they are delegating responsibility, and they are showing themselves that they are very aware about their own individual self, and I call it superpower, or their own authentic human style. And that is really what makes you best. And I think if you are a good listener, that would already be a great leader in my mind.
Something just occurred to me as you were saying that, and that is the analogy I'm coming up with is parents that read parenting books are better parents. Now, is that because of the book, or because of the type of parents that read parenting books are just naturally good parents? And it's the same thing for leaders. Is if you're going to leadership training, maybe just that self-discovery and wanting to be a better leader is more important than what the leadership training is teaching you. Stephanie, does that make any sense, or am I off there?
I mean, like in a rare occasion, you did make sense, but I would also say that it's the same thing. Like, being a leader doesn't mean you're always, going through those 4 steps. What it means, like, sometimes what you need to be doing as a good leader is stepping in and being decisive and taking some very quick commander type actions, because that's what people need you to do right now. We're in a conflict, or there's a crisis, or there's
decisions. Yeah.
Sure. Yeah. But be okay with it. And the way that you communicate around it, and the way that the way that you influence the team that you have, if there's trust, and if you've, practiced in a way that is really aligned with your vision for yourself, when you have to step in and make hard, fast decisions, everybody's going to be on board, right? So this is like putting money in the bank all the time, and knowing when you have to show. Like, imagine if you're in a crisis and you want to go and use your consensus type energy, like, that's not going to work for you, right? So I do think that sometimes a leader isn't, sometimes the listen and empathy and all that, like, it's a different situation, and we actually need to show up and your team needs you to show up and be decisive and be a commander for a little bit, right?
Christiane, I would love you to weigh in on this too, because something that occurred to me about what you were saying, Stephanie, is I once knew a leader that thought that his leadership style was like, he learned over time that when he panicked, things got done. So he panicked. He pretended like there was a crisis all the time.
Oh yeah.
In order to get things done. And that worked for a while until something that was really a crisis came up, and nobody Like
Yes.
it was crying wolf. Like it didn't have any additional impact on the team because they were in crisis mode all the time. Christiane, have you seen that? And how do you navigate that sense of urgency that is the normal cadence that you need as a leader versus, all right, we need to deal with this like it's a crisis?
Oh, I think it's a beautiful example because it definitely shows that the agility we talked about earlier is so true. Really tuning in and reading the audience and your team members and figuring out what they need on that particular day. Do I need to be more listening and empathetic, or do you need to be more making decisions quickly because that's really what's on the agenda for the day? I think if you always be like, you mentioned like in this crisis mode, it really wears off and people get tired of it. And in my opinion, something like that also instills a certain amount of fear to where I'm feeling, is this person trying to scare me? Is this like a tactic just to get things done? Or is this actually truly a deadline that's coming up right here? Which leads a little bit to a feeling of distrust or dishonesty in a person. And over time, it's not going to work anymore because it's just like, running a marathon every day. We get tired of it. It's like, you don't do this every day. You do this every so often. But we don't do this every day. It's like, boring.
And sorry, I thought you said,
no, go for it. And at the same time, I also want to emphasize that I think what a good leader really is they basically align themselves. So it's personal development with a paycheck attached to it. That's how I look at that. If you're a good leader, you really aligned yourself personally and you get paid for it. And that's how you should look at it.
Stephanie, give us one more comment before we jump into the speed round here. I'd love to hear your take on that.
So I remember working with a CEO of a $1 billion company, and she worked with a board of directors and a management team of people who were all engineers. And they had learned over time that their happy place was always in crisis. Like they wanted everything to be a crisis project because they could then sink in and do the work that they identified their identities were sort of tied to, solving technical problems. And so they felt most at home when they were solving so they would purposely not, like they had no project management team in place. This was billions of dollars of technical work without a project management team in place, without any of the structure, without anything, because it fed on their sense of identity to be constantly being the saviors because they could flex their muscle around their intelligence on a technical level. And so they didn't want to put anything else in place to be able to make the company function better because it didn't serve their personal identities. So that self-awareness, again, coming back to that, to be able to see who am I as a leader and where do I function best? And then what does the business need from me? And if it's something else than what I can provide, then I better put people in place to be able to do that.
So they did that panic mode. They did that purposefully and with self-awareness.
They did it. So I would argue that if you had told them that, they would go, what? No,
they would deny it. Yeah.
Well, they didn't have that self-awareness because they're all a bunch of, like, I come from a technology background and I worked in the technology sector for, 25 years. And I know that behavior, like the hero complex of being the one with all the information, right? And so as a leader, being so aware of where you are constantly trying to play to your strengths. I've seen leaders who really what they need to be doing is going out in public and being visible. But what they do is every time something feels uncomfortable, they go and like operationally try to fix something because that's where their comfort is, right? So as a leader, I think you have to be aware of those biases that you have as well.
Yeah, if it's the one responsibility of a leader is to do the uncomfortable thing that nobody else is going to do. That is absolutely your job. All right, Christiane, are you ready for the speed round? All right, question 1. Your team waits for your equivalent. What?
You have to finish saying it before you play the music.
Did I? Was I?
We're so excited to play it. You're like, are you ready for the speed?
All right. So your team waits for your approval on everything. Do you delegate authority now, or do you refine processes first?
Delegate now.
A crisis demands immediate direction, but your style is collaborative. Do you command decisively or gather input quickly?
Gathering input quickly.
A new hire expects coaching. You prefer autonomy. Do you adapt your style to temporarily for that hire, or do you require the hire to fit?
I always hire for character and train for skill. So that's probably what I would look at.
Okay. You're known for being hands-on. Scale requires distance. Do you step back abruptly or transition gradually?
Transition gradually.
That was a softball. Your visionary approach inspires but lacks execution. Do you shift to operational focus or hire an operator?
Hire an operator.
Awesome. Stephanie, what are your founder fundamentals? What did you take away from this?
I could have this conversation for probably 3 hours, so I'm going to try and be brief.
Awesome.
What was that? Sounded loaded. I'm not going to read into that. Take small steps to reach your goal. So this is this whole concept of the petite practice, right? So when you are trying to become and develop yourself as a leader, you don't have to go from 0 to 100 right away. Like start chipping away at better understanding and make micro shifts. Self-awareness is the most important skill that you can develop as a leader. Leaders need to be aware of when certain types of leadership are required and how to apply those during different phases of growth and different types of activities within the organization, depending on what you need to do. One size fits all for leadership doesn't work. I liked the LEAD acronym for listen, empathy, authenticity, and delegation. Navigating consensus and urgency within leadership means that we have to be able to be fluid and know when consensus is important and know when urgency is important. And I also, I'm adding this one, if you're committed to a leadership style, you've already got a problem.
Oh, that's awesome. All right. There was nothing loaded in that, Stephanie. I did think it was awesome that you could talk about it for 3 hours.
I'm just fragile.
And I just think you're an awesome human being. And I know you need to hear that every time I don't say that enough. All right. Yeah. Deep dive resources, Leadership and Self-Discipline by the Arbinger Institute. The Leadership Challenge by James Coase and Barry Posner. Primal Leadership by Daniel Richard and Annie. And Turn the Ship Around by David Marquette. Today was a terrific discussion, Christiane. Where can our listeners learn more about you?
Find me at my website, drchristiane.com. Tune into my podcast, Happy Healthy Hustle. And then, of course, check out my books on Amazon. They're all available right there, including the great manual, Discovering Your Superpower.
Awesome. Stephanie, go ahead and close this out.
All right. Thank you so much for listening and for being here with us. We really, really appreciate our audience. And if you're commenting on our episodes, we love having you here. Please make sure to visit us at howtofounder.com. You can connect with us there and subscribe on LinkedIn and subscribe to YouTube and Apple Podcasts and Spotify channels. We're in all the places. And we just want to remind you that we believe you are the pioneer of economic prosperity. We're grateful for you being here with us, and we are so happy to share your journey all along the way.
Thanks, everybody. Thank you, Christiane. Thank you, Stephanie.
Thank you.